deli worker shoved expired meat at a quiet black man and mocked him in front of everyone, but 60 minutes later, the entire store and their lives were turned upside down. Take this one instead. Ashley Martinez slid a package of gray, slimy chicken across the counter, her lips curling in a smile that wasn't kind but mocking. The expiration date glared up from the plastic wrap, 3 days past due. But Ashley tilted her head like she was offering him some sort of favor. Derek Thompson looked down at the spoiled meat, then lifted his eyes to the neatly stacked display of fresh chicken glistening just behind her. "I'd prefer the fresh chicken, please," he said evenly, but his voice was almost swallowed by the hum of the refrigerators and the low chatter of the line forming behind him. Ashley wrinkled her nose as though he had asked for something absurd, something unworthy. "Fresh chicken, that's $47 a pound." She tapped the label on the spoiled package with one long fingernail. "This expired stuff is more your budget anyway." Her voice carried, deliberately pitched so that the people waiting behind could hear. A ripple of uncomfortable silence moved through the small crowd, and then Ashley reached under the counter, grabbed a spray bottle of disinfectant, and began scrubbing the surface where Derek's hand had brushed. She sprayed with theatrical exaggeration. Each mist accompanied by a gagging noise, her face twisted in mock disgust. Several customers chuckled nervously, the sound sharp in the sterile air. Derek stood still, his shoulders squared, his jaw set. He didn't flinch, didn't argue. His silence only sharpened the cruelty of Ashley's performance. A teenager in line, her phone already in hand, quietly swiped her screen. Her name was Zara Williams, though no one there knew it yet. She tilted the camera for a perfect angle and whispered to her live stream, "Are you seeing this? This is unbelievable." The numbers on her screen began to climb, a few viewers turning into dozens. Meanwhile, Ashley kept scrubbing, muttering loud enough for all to hear, "Can't be too careful. You never know what kind of germs people bring in here." The phrase floated in the air, heavy and unmistakable. A middle-aged man shifted uncomfortably in line. A mother tightened her grip on her daughter's hand. The cruelty was no longer subtle. It was public, deliberate, meant to humiliate. Derek's eyes lingered on the fresh chicken behind her, but he said nothing more. His silence was not surrender, but something harder to read, a patience that seemed out of place against the open contempt he faced. Ashley leaned forward, her voice dropping into something almost sweet. "You should be grateful," she said. "Most people wouldn't even get the chance to buy this." She nudged the spoiled package closer, pushing it into Derek's space, as though daring him to accept his place. The line behind him shuffled, caught between discomfort and voyeurism. A silent audience to the small theater of cruelty. Zara's viewers crossed 100. Comments began scrolling fast. "That's expired. Is this legal? Why are they treating him like that?" Ashley either didn't notice or didn't care. She laughed, sharp and brittle, spraying the counter one last time with a flourish. Derek's hand tightened around the strap of his worn messenger bag, his expression unreadable. He looked down once more at the spoiled chicken, then back at Ashley, and finally to the display case behind her. The contrast was stark. Fresh, vibrant food gleaming under perfect lights just out of reach, while in front of him lay only rot and disdain. The crowd shifted again, whispers rising and falling. Some eyes were sympathetic, others indifferent. For the moment, the imbalance of power was absolute. The deli worker laughed, the customer endured, and the onlookers pretended not to see. But Zara's lens caught everything. Her viewers were still climbing, the comments growing sharper, angrier. The stage had been set. What looked like a quiet humiliation was already something more. The metallic squeak of the walk-in cooler door cut through the tense silence. Brad Kowalski emerged, khakis perfectly pressed, polo shirt immaculate, every step carrying the authority of someone who believed this store belonged to him. He scanned the counter, his gaze sliding over Derek with a practiced contempt before landing on Ashley. "Problem here, Ash?" His voice was casual but already poisoned with judgment. Ashley smirked and pointed toward Derek. "He's insisting on the premium salmon. I tried to help him with the older stock." Brad's eyes dropped to Derek's sneakers, scuffed and worn. His jeans carried a small tear near the pocket. The shirt he wore was clean but faded, evidence of years not weeks. Brad's expression soured further. "Sir, our Atlantic salmon is $47 a pound, caught fresh this morning." His tone made it clear he didn't believe Derek belonged in this part of the store. "But we do have some day-old portions, significantly cheaper." He gestured toward a section tucked to the side, fish with dull flesh and browned edges, a tray that smelled faintly of salt and something sour. Derek kept his voice steady. "I'd prefer the fresh salmon. Could I see the harvest date on the packaging?" For a brief moment, Ashley and Brad exchanged a look, silent agreement flashing between them. Brad stepped forward, deliberately placing himself between Derek and the gleaming display case as though guarding treasure. "The fresh fish is for our preferred customers," he said, drawing out the words so the line of waiting shoppers could hear. "People who shop here regularly, people who spend serious money." The implication was clear. Derek wasn't one of them. A few customers shuffled uncomfortably. A woman in a business suit pressed her lips together but said nothing. A young father pulled his son closer, whispering something inaudible. The line had become an audience, every person trapped in the tension, no one brave enough to break it. Ashley, emboldened by Brad's presence, laughed softly. "I told him the discount mart down the street would be more his speed." She sprayed the counter again, shaking her head in mock disgust. Derek didn't move, didn't retreat. He simply adjusted his sleeve, a subtle motion that revealed a glint of polished metal beneath the cuff. It was there and gone in an instant, but enough for a few sharp-eyed onlookers to notice. For them, the question shifted from pity to curiosity. Brad leaned closer, lowering his voice but not enough to hide the disdain. "Look, you're not the kind of customer we expect at Fresh Market Elite. These displays are for people who belong here." He tilted his head toward the dull, discounted section. "That's where you'll find something more appropriate." Derek's reply was calm, almost too calm against the rising hostility. "What makes someone a real customer? Exactly?" The question landed like a stone dropped in water, ripples spreading through the uneasy silence. Brad smirked, but didn't answer directly. Instead, he squared his shoulders, blocking the view of the premium salmon entirely. Behind him, the ice-glittering fillets looked like forbidden jewels, accessible only to those deemed worthy. The sense of exclusion was suffocating, deliberate, engineered. In the crowd, Zara's phone trembled slightly in her hands as she tightened her grip, making sure her camera captured every detail. Her livestream viewer count ticked upward, the comments growing sharper. "That's discrimination. He's not even doing anything wrong. Why is she laughing?" One by one, the watchers behind Derek were pulled into the silent question of the moment. Was this just about fish, or something far larger? Brad's posture left no doubt. This wasn't about the price tag or the product. It was about status, appearance, and an unspoken hierarchy that decided who deserved dignity and who did not. Derek stood, quiet and immovable, facing two employees who believed their judgment outweighed his humanity. The line shifted again, a wave of unease passing over strangers who knew, deep down, that they were witnessing something more than a customer service dispute. They were witnessing the culture of a store laid bare. The crowd at the deli counter had grown thicker, the fluorescent lights above casting a cold, clinical glare over every tense face. Derek slid his phone from his pocket and held it steady, angling the camera toward the packages Brad had pushed on him. The lens caught the cloudy flesh, the expiration date stamped in black ink that no one could deny. The soft click of the shutter echoed louder than it should have, a sound that made Brad stiffen. "Hey, you can't do that," Brad snapped, lunging forward as though he might snatch the device right out of Derek's hand. Derek didn't move, didn't flinch, simply took another picture with the same quiet precision. "Food safety is public information," he said evenly, his tone calm against Brad's rising fury, "especially when you're selling expired products." A murmur spread through the line. A woman clutched her purse tighter. Someone whispered, "Is that even legal?" Ashley rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath but loud enough for others to hear, "He's just trying to cause trouble." Brad's jaw tightened. "Sir, if you don't stop photographing, I'll have to ask you to leave." He reached out a hand as if daring Derek to resist. Derek lowered the phone slightly but didn't put it away. "I'll wait for your manager," he said. His voice was steady, but his words landed with weight, like a challenge. The murmurs in the line grew louder. A middle-aged black woman shook her head. "My grandson got food poisoning here once," she said, her voice trembling with restrained anger. "I see now how it happened." A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. Eyes shifted to the packages on the counter, then back to Derek, and then to Brad, who was visibly rattled. Zara tilted her phone higher, whispering to her livestream, "Chat says this is discrimination." The comments scrolled so fast she could barely read them. One viewer typed, "He's calm, they're panicking." Another, "Don't let them bully him." Above the deli counter, the digital clock ticked to 11:00 a.m. The numbers glowed against the white wall, 60 minutes remaining. A countdown that no one understood yet, but its presence gave the moment a sense of inevitability, like the seconds were marching toward something larger than spoiled salmon. Derek adjusted his grip on the phone, his movements measured. Brad's face reddened. "Sir, you're disrupting business," he snapped. "You're not even supposed to be here." His voice was louder now, pitched to the crowd, as though if he said it forcefully enough it would become the truth. Derek glanced at the time, then back at Brad. "I am a customer," he replied calmly, "a customer with the right to document what I'm offered." Ashley slammed a tray onto the counter, her voice sharp and mocking. "It's not expired, it's just marked down. There's a difference." But the words fell flat against the clear numbers on the packaging. The evidence didn't lie. A man in line cleared his throat. "Actually, she's wrong." His voice carried the measured tone of someone used to being heard. He stepped forward, crisp suit, glasses perched on his nose, confidence radiating from his posture. "In this state, only one party has to consent to a recording. If he's part of the conversation, it's perfectly legal." Brad froze, the words hitting like a blow. Ashley blinked rapidly, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. The crowd erupted in whispers, louder this time, fueled by both outrage and validation. Zara's stream jumped again, her viewer count crossing 500. A comment flashed, "He knows the law." Another, "This is getting serious." Derek said nothing, only slipped the phone back into his pocket, a quiet acknowledgement that his every move was deliberate. He wasn't flustered, he wasn't rattled. He was collecting evidence, piece by piece, layer by layer, while those trying to shame him were revealing their own corruption. The countdown ticked silently above their heads, each glowing digit a reminder that the humiliation unfolding in this corner of the store was no longer just a private cruelty. It was becoming a case, a record, a story that would not end where Brad and Ashley expected. The sound of heels striking tile echoed before she appeared, sharp and deliberate, each step cutting through the uneasy silence that had swallowed the deli. Heads turned as Rebecca Stone entered, her posture regal, her eyes carrying the weight of someone who believed she ruled this place. The crowd shifted, relief flickering in their faces. Here was the store manager. Surely she would put an end to the scene, balance the scales, and correct her staff. But Rebecca's gaze swept over Derek like a blade, her assessment quick and merciless. Faded jeans, scuffed shoes, a quiet demeanor that suggested he was alone. She did not see a customer to defend. She saw a problem to eliminate. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp, slicing through the crowd's whispers. Brad straightened immediately, relief flooding his expression. "This man is harassing our staff, taking unauthorized photos, disrupting business." Rebecca's eyes narrowed on Derek, her mouth curling into a dismissive smirk. "Sir, I'm going to need you to delete those photos and leave the premises." The crowd stilled, waiting for Derek's response, waiting for reason. Derek held his ground, voice calm, even. "I'd like to speak with you about your food rotation practices and your customer service policies." Rebecca's laugh was sharp, calculated to embarrass. "Policies? From someone who doesn't even shop here regularly." A ripple of discomfort ran through the line, but Rebecca pressed on, her tone meant to belittle. "This is Fresh Market Elite. We have standards." Derek said nothing, only lifted his phone, the screen glowing faintly as he pulled up the photographs. Expiration dates, spoiled packages, evidence that couldn't be argued away. Rebecca's eyes hardened. In a sudden motion that made the crowd gasp, she snatched the phone from his hand. The act was so aggressive, so unexpected, that for a moment time seemed to freeze. Gasps broke the silence. She just stole his phone. A woman cried out, her voice rising above the murmur. "You can't do that," someone else shouted. Zara's livestream tilted wildly as she captured the moment, her viewers erupting with comments. "That's theft. Call the police. This is crazy." Rebecca scrolled through the images with a cold efficiency, her expression flickering from annoyance to alarm as the incriminating photos flashed across the screen. "These photos are taken out of context," she said finally, but her voice carried less conviction now, the certainty slipping through her grasp. "The dates are clearly visible," Derek replied calmly, his tone like a scalpel. "Your staff tried to sell me expired fish, then made discriminatory comments about my appearance." The words hung heavy in the air. Discriminatory? Rebecca's pitch rose, her confidence straining. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof beyond your claims?" Derek gestured to the crowd, dozens of witnesses, some recording, others whispering to one another. Multiple witnesses and recordings. Ashley's voice cracked as she blurted out, "He's been secretly recording us. That's illegal." "No, it isn't," a woman from the crowd interrupted. She stepped forward, her presence commanding, her words measured. "This is a single-party consent state. He can record any conversation he's part of." She spoke with the clarity of someone who knew the law, and the weight of her words tilted the room. Rebecca's face flushed crimson, her jaw tightening as she struggled to regain control. Her eyes darted to the security camera overhead, then back to Derek, who stood silently, his composure unshaken. Enough, Rebecca snapped, reaching for her radio. Security to the deli, code yellow. Within moments, 2 guards pushed through the crowd, broad-shouldered, moving with the assurance of men accustomed to compliance. Their presence shifted the energy, turning a customer service conflict into something heavier, more dangerous. "This man is trespassing, harassing my staff, and refusing to leave," Rebecca declared, her voice loud, her tone resolute. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," one guard said, his hand hovering dangerously close to Derek's arm. Derek didn't move. His voice was calm, controlled, deliberate. "I haven't broken any laws. I'm a customer reporting food safety violations." The guard's tone hardened. "You're disturbing other customers. Time to go." The irony was suffocating. The disturbance had begun with Ashley, fueled by Brad, sanctioned by Rebecca, but the man who stood quietly with evidence in his hand was the one being cast out. The crowd murmured uneasily, the tension electric. Some reached for their phones, others for courage. But no one stepped between Derek and the authority bearing down on him. For a moment, it seemed final, inevitable, the door closing, the trap snapping shut. Rebecca's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, certain she had reasserted control. But above them, the digital clock ticked forward. 11:07 a.m., 53 minutes remaining. The crowd didn't know it yet, but the game was only just beginning. The siren glow of red and blue lights bled through the front windows, washing over the polished tile floor. The deli fell into silence as 2 uniformed officers entered, their radios crackling faintly, their presence heavy enough to bend the air. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a path that led straight to Derek, who still stood at the counter with calm, unflinching eyes. Rebecca stepped forward quickly, seizing the moment. "Officers, this man is trespassing, harassing my staff, and refusing to leave." Her voice carried like a gavel, decisive and absolute. The first officer, tall with a clipped tone, looked Derek up and down, his hand already brushing the cuffs on his belt. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us. You're disturbing business here." Derek didn't move. His silence was not defiance, but something sharper, something that made the crowd lean in. Rebecca pressed on, her voice rising. "He's taken photos, recordings, refusing direct orders. This is a disruption." The second officer nodded gravely and stepped closer. "So place your hands behind your back." Derek's gaze flicked toward the glowing red digits on the clock above the counter. 11:15 a.m., 45 minutes remaining. He lifted his wrist slightly, eyes resting on the watch that gleamed briefly beneath his sleeve. Then he looked at the officers, his tone calm, unhurried, chilling. "In 45 minutes, you'll regret those words." The crowd froze. For a heartbeat, even the fluorescent hum seemed to fade. The officers hesitated, their training telling them to act, their instincts warning them to wait. Rebecca's lips tightened, her face pale with anger. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" Derek's voice carried easily across the gathered silence. "I said in 45 minutes, you'll regret treating me this way." He let the words hang, not as a threat, but as a certainty, something inevitable. Zara zoomed her camera, whispering to her growing live stream. "Did you hear that? He knows something." Chat exploded across her screen. "Who is this guy? He's too calm. No one stands that steady if they don't have backup." The first officer recovered his authority, though unease flickered across his expression. "Sir, I don't know what game you're playing, but right now you need to comply." Derek shook his head slowly. "I'm not playing a game. I'm waiting for corporate inspection." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Corporate inspection? What corporate?" Rebecca's head snapped toward him, fury flashing. That information was confidential. Only senior management knew the timing. How could he possibly? Derek didn't elaborate. He simply adjusted the strap of his bag and repeated, his voice even quieter but cutting sharper. "I'll wait here for corporate." The crowd buzzed, whispers growing louder, disbelief and curiosity feeding each other. Could he be? Is he with them? Someone hissed, "Maybe he works for corporate." Another voice shot back, "Dressed like that? No way." The digital clock ticked again, 11:16, 44 minutes remaining. The countdown pulsed over the deli like a metronome, each second drawing them closer to something unseen. Rebecca's confidence faltered. She turned to the officers, her words rushed, defensive. "He's bluffing. Just get him out of here." The second officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the crowd with their raised phones, the dozens of witnesses. The live stream screens glowing. If this man was telling the truth and corporate arrived to find him removed in handcuffs, the fallout would be catastrophic. Zara whispered to her camera, "Chat says don't let them take him. This is bigger." The viewer count surged again, climbing past 1,000. Derek's calm became the center of gravity in the chaos. He wasn't pleading, wasn't explaining. He was waiting, as if he knew the weight of the next hour belonged to him. The guards stood tense. Rebecca's authority cracking, the officers caught between procedure and instinct. And above them, the glowing digits on the clock kept ticking, counting down toward the moment when everything would shift. The low rumble of an engine outside drew heads toward the front windows. A sleek black SUV pulled into the executive parking space, its tinted glass reflecting the harsh daylight. Doors opened in sequence, and three figures in tailored suits stepped out, moving with purpose, their eyes locked on the entrance. The crowd inside parted instinctively, the tension breaking into murmurs as the trio strode through the automatic doors like a scene from a movie where everything changes. Rebecca froze, color draining from her face. They weren't scheduled until noon, she whispered, disbelief cracking her voice. How could they possibly? Derek glanced at the clock above the counter, then at his watch. 11:32 a.m., 28 minutes remaining. He slipped a small leather wallet from his jacket, its surface worn but unmistakably expensive. With deliberate calm, he flipped it open and held it where everyone could see. The Fresh Market Elite logo gleamed on the badge. Beneath it, his name and title, Derek Thompson, Regional Vice President of Operations. The silence was deafening. Ashley dropped the price gun she had been holding, the plastic clattering against the tile in a sound that seemed to echo for miles. Brad stumbled back a step, his posture collapsing, his mouth opening without words. The security guards froze, their hands hovering in the air as if the badge had turned to fire in front of them. A whisper rippled through the crowd, then a gasp, then a swell of voices. He's corporate, he's the boss. Oh my God. Zara's live stream went wild. Comments poured in faster than the app could display them. He's the VP, plot twist. This is insane. Derek's voice cut through the chaos, steady, unyielding. For the past 8 months, this location has been flagged for systematic customer service issues. Today was an unscheduled assessment to identify the cause. His eyes shifted to Rebecca, whose composure cracked visibly, her jaw clenched in panic. You can't be serious, she stammered, though the badge in his hand told the truth she didn't want to face. Would you like to call corporate to verify? Derek asked evenly. I can give you the direct number. It's my number. The crowd erupted again, phones raised higher, recording every angle. Ashley's breathing came fast, panic in her eyes. Please, sir, I didn't know. I didn't realize. Derek's eyes met hers with quiet steel. You didn't know who I was, he said, but you knew who you thought I was, and that's exactly the problem. The crowd murmured louder, a chorus of agreement, a mirror of outrage finally vindicated. Rebecca swayed where she stood, her authority bleeding out like sand through open fingers. The officers who had come to escort Derek stepped back, suddenly unwilling to intervene in what was clearly a matter beyond their reach. It was no longer a trespass complaint. It was a corporate reckoning. Then another voice broke through the uproar, confident, clear, unexpected. Actually, I should introduce myself too. Every head turned. Zara stepped forward, lowering her phone at last, her live stream still running but no longer hidden. From her blazer pocket, she produced a slim badge, the same corporate insignia etched in silver. Zara Williams, compliance officer, she announced. I've been documenting this entire interaction for our quarterly bias assessment. The second revelation hit harder than the first. Rebecca staggered back a step, her voice trembling. Impossible. The crowd gasped again, disbelieving and elated all at once. 2 corporate operatives, undercover, standing right in front of them. The live stream exploded, comments flying in waves, double undercover. This is the craziest plot twist ever, shut them down. The viewer count shot upward in real time, 5,006, 7, climbing faster than anyone could read. Derek slipped his badge back into the wallet and folded it with precision, tucking it under his arm like a weapon holstered. His voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute authority. You see, Rebecca, the inspection didn't begin when the SUV pulled up. It began the moment I walked through your door. Every word you spoke, every product Ashley shoved across this counter, every discriminatory remark, all of it has been documented, photographed, and recorded. He gestured towards Zara, who nodded, a tablet glowing with captured data and streaming comments. The proof is undeniable, she said, scrolling through photos and timestamps. 43 customer complaints in the past 6 months. Today we documented exactly why. Rebecca's lips parted, her words collapsing into silence. The floor beneath her career was falling away. Derek straightened, his gaze sweeping the deli, the employees, the guards, the customers who had witnessed everything. This is what happens when a culture of contempt replaces a culture of respect. His words landed with surgical precision, cutting through the haze of disbelief. Ashley's hands shook, mascara smudging as tears welled. Brad stared at the badge like it might burn him if he looked too long. The guard stepped back again, retreating from the center of a storm that was no longer theirs to contain. The SUV outside had signaled change, but it was the badges that detonated it. The illusion of power that Brad, Ashley, and Rebecca had clung to collapsed in seconds. What remained was truth, streaming live, unstoppable. Derek checked his watch once. 11:34 a.m., 26 minutes remaining. The countdown continued, but the balance of power had already shifted. The quiet man they marked had revealed himself as their highest authority, and the store they thought they controlled was no longer theirs. It belonged to the evidence, to the crowd, to the thousands watching live. It belonged to Derek Thompson. The air inside the store was electric, every breath heavy with the weight of revelation. Phones were raised higher than ever, the live stream counter on Zara's screen exploding past 10,000 viewers, the chat a blur of disbelief and triumph. In the center of it all stood Derek, his badge still gleaming in memory, his presence steady as stone. Rebecca's authority had collapsed, Ashley trembled, Brad's bravado was gone, and yet the moment wasn't finished. Derek slipped a thick folder from his leather portfolio and opened it slowly, the sound of paper against paper unnerving in the silence. "Let's talk about numbers," he said, his voice amplified by the hush. 43 formal discrimination complaints from this location in 6 months. Customer satisfaction ratings averaging 2.1 out of 5, worst in the district. His tone was clinical, detached, as if reciting a diagnosis rather than an opinion. White customers rated staff courtesy at 2.8, Hispanic customers 1.9, black customers 0.7. The crowd gasped, the disparity hitting harder than any insult could. Ashley's tears spilled freely, her mascara streaking down her face. "Please, I didn't mean," Derek cut her off with the sharpness of truth. "You didn't mean to be caught." Brad tried to rally, his voice desperate, cracked. "Everyone does it, the culture here, it's how we're trained." Derek didn't blink. "Then the culture is rotten, and cultures can change." Rebecca couldn't even muster denial. Her lips moved, but no words came, the weight of the evidence suffocating. The officers who had once hovered ready to handcuff Derek now stood back, silent witnesses to a justice unfolding. Derek glanced at the clock. 11:40 a.m., 20 minutes remaining. His phone buzzed in his hand. He tapped speaker, and a commanding voice filled the store. "This is Marcus Williams, CEO of Fresh Market Elite. We're watching the live stream. CNN just called. What's happening on the ground?" Derek looked up at the crowd, then spoke clearly into the phone. "Systematic discrimination confirmed. Food safety violations documented. Harassment of customers recorded and broadcast to over 10,000 live viewers. Immediate liability in the millions if left unaddressed." The CEO's reply was crisp, without hesitation. "What do you recommend?" Derek pulled out another document marked Corrective Action Plan. "Effective immediately, staff involved are terminated. Mandatory bias elimination training begins this week. Expired inventory destroyed under Health Department supervision. Promotions awarded to qualified employees overlooked due to bias." He turned toward the produce section. "Kesha Williams, please step forward." A young black woman froze mid-motion, still holding a box of apples, her eyes wide. Derek gestured for her. "You've been here 3 years, certified in food safety, consistently praised in customer feedback. Effective immediately, you are assistant manager. Your salary is increased to $52,000. Kesha covered her mouth with her hands, tears welling, the crowd erupting in applause. Derek's gaze shifted. Carlos Menz stepped forward. A Hispanic man stocking shelves approached nervously. "You speak 3 languages, have community ties, and deliver excellent service. Effective today, head of customer service." The cheers swelled louder. Phones caught every detail, chat flooded with approval. "This is what justice looks like. This is change." Ashley sobbed openly now, her pleas drowned by the roar of vindication. Rebecca stood rigid, her career dissolving before thousands of eyes. Brad muttered something about unfairness, but Derek silenced him with one sentence. "You denied fairness every day. Why should you receive what you refused to give?" Derek returned his focus to the phone, his voice firm. "These measures must be corporate policy." "Approved," said the CEO instantly, his voice carrying the urgency of survival. "Whatever resources are required." Derek closed the folder with finality. "Then we begin today." Above them, the clock ticked to 11:44, 16 minutes remaining. The crowd wasn't just relieved, they were elated. Justice had not been delayed to back rooms or future hearings. It was immediate, visible, undeniable. A store once drenched in contempt had become a stage for transformation. and for the first time, the people watching, both in person and online, believed that change was not only possible, it was already happening. 3 months later, the same store looked unrecognizable. The cold fluorescent glare had been replaced with warm golden light, sunlight pouring through freshly cleaned windows. Customers moved easily between aisles, laughter mingling with the sound of carts. The staff reflected the community now, faces of every background working together with pride rather than fear. At the front, Kesha Williams stood confidently behind the counter, her badge reading assistant manager. Carlos Menz walked the floor, greeting shoppers in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, his new title head of customer service worn with quiet dignity. The energy was different, alive, welcoming. Near the produce section, an elderly black woman approached Derek, her steps slow but steady. She was the same woman who had once spoken up about her grandson's food poisoning. Her voice was soft now, filled with something rare in places like this. "Thank you. This feels like a new world." Derek inclined his head but said nothing, letting the moment speak for itself. Nearby, Zara tapped on her tablet, her live stream long over but her data still flowing. "No discrimination complaints filed in the last 3 months," she said aloud, her voice carrying, "not one." The crowd that heard her applauded, not for the numbers alone but for what they represented. Change that was real, change that lasted. Derek stood near the back, silent, watching the transformation unfold. He didn't need to command or instruct anymore. The proof was in front of him, in the way customers were greeted, in the way employees treated one another, in the way the store had become a part of the community instead of a place people endured. He finally spoke, his words steady, carrying the weight of the journey. "They thought dignity was a privilege. We proved it's a right." The phrase hung in the air, simple yet unshakable, turning a single confrontation into a call that reached beyond the walls of one store. The live stream may have ended, but the story hadn't. The viewers who had once watched in outrage now carried the message further, pressing record on their own experiences, demanding better where they lived and worked. Derek's quiet victory was not his alone. It belonged to everyone who believed respect should not be rationed, and justice should not be optional. It was a reminder that change begins when one person chooses to stand, document, and refuse to be silenced. One voice at a counter had become a chorus. One act of courage had become a movement. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.